The stars are right, and that means it's time for another episode of The Whisper in Darkness. I'm your host, The Man from Lang. Thank you very much for joining me today. On this episode, we are wrapping up our reviews of the player cards in the Scarlet Keys Investigator expansion with a look at the Survivor and Neutral customizable cards. In this episode, we discuss Pocket Multi-Tool, Makeshift Trap, Grizzled, and the Hyperphysical Shotcaster. There are spoilers throughout if you care about that sort of thing. If you enjoy what you hear, remember to like, comment, and subscribe. Before we get started, a quick reminder of how we rate cards here on The Whisper in Darkness. The best of the best get an Elder Sign, while the worst of the worst get an Auto Fail, and the cards in between get a +1, 0, or Elder Thing respectively. Cards that you build around or cards that are good in one particular deck get a Bless token, while cards that we believe are destined to end up on the list of taboos or are simply bad for the big game get a Curse token. Before I get started, I'd like to thank the patrons of this channel for their tremendous support. You all rock. If you'd like to be amazing like these people and support the channel's goals and see your name on this list, head over to patreon.com, sign up for a tier of your choice, and claim your rewards. That would be awesome. Special thanks to Cole Monroe Chitty, Nicole Fiscus, and Nate Lost in Time and Space for their contributions to the channel. I couldn't do it without you. Without further ado, let's get started. Welcome back to our reviews of the player cards in the Scarlet Keys Investigator expansion. We are going to wrap up our look at the customizable cards in the box with a look at the Survivor and Neutral customizables. And that will do it for our look at the cards in the Scarlet Keys. Matastrophic and I have been making our way through these cards for months at this point. Usually we would give our final thoughts on the set at the end of the video, but let's talk a little bit about it at the beginning. Final thoughts on the set as a whole, Matastrophic, now that we have seen all the cards.
Oh man, after we've seen all the cards. So if you're a new player, this is not your first set, because a lot of the cards in it are very finicky and specific to certain styles of play. A lot of them ask you to build the deck that the designers intended, whether it's the illicit deck with Underworld Market, whether it's the Doom deck, with Amina. You've got kind of awkward investigators like Carson, to work with if you don't have a very large collection. So I admit, as far as sets go, this is not your first set or even your second. This is definitely one for you have everything else and you're using this to do weird things. I think if I had to do a one paragraph review, that would be it.
Yeah, I think this set, more than others we have seen in the past, the designers had very clear ideas what they wanted each class to be able to do. And so most of the cards in each class are designed with that one or two decks in mind.
Yeah.
And if you're not going to play those particular decks, then there just aren't a lot of cards that are generally useful in a bunch of decks. Now, I think at this point in the card game's life cycle, I think we're getting well past the point where the designers can just sort of create a generally useful card without breaking something.
It's kind of true.
Because there are just too many interactions to keep track of. And if they make a card that is generally good, it's probably going to be above the power level, and people will abuse the living hell out of it. So I agree with you that if you are just jumping into the game, I wouldn't necessarily recommend the Scarlet Keys, at least the Investigator expansion, as your first set. And especially because something like the Doom deck, you do kind of need cards from other sets in order to play it properly. They didn't reprint Moonlight Ritual for one, so your Doom removal at level 0 is pretty minimal. And of course there are the customizables. I wasn't a huge fan of them at the beginning. I have warmed to them a little bit because having sat down and sort of looked through them, but I do still find them somewhat annoying because you do require an entirely different card in order to play them, and there is a lot of text on those cards and a lot of abilities. As a solo player, I don't have to worry about this so much, but if I was showing up at multiplayer tables and somebody slaps a customizable card down on the table, I'm just going to be like, well, I hope you know how it works, because I'm not going to be asking you. There have been comments on our videos of people who have simply skipped this set altogether because they They are very unhappy about the customizable cards. And I think in some cases the designers did well. The customizable cards have interesting abilities on them, some interesting choices to make, and then in other cases there's just a lot of words to do.
Oh yeah, not a lot.
Not a
Yeah.
lot. So
Mm-hmm.
keep that in mind. But we do have 4 cards to talk about, and we are going to do that now. The first Survivor customizable card is Pocket Multi-Tool. It is a 3-cost asset with a wild skill icon, item, and tool trait customizable, limit 1 per investigator. As a free triggered ability, during a skill test you are performing, exhaust Pocket Multi-Tool. You get +1 skill value for this test, and the Pocket Multi-Tool takes up a hand slot. So it does have sort of a magnifying glass ability that you can use for any skill. Pocket Multi-Tool has 7 customizations. For 1 XP you can get detachable. Other investigators at your location may use the ability on Pocket Multi-Tool. For 1 XP you can turn it into a pry bar. You get an additional +1 skill value if this is during a skill test on a treachery. For 2 XP you can get sharpened knife. You get an additional +1 skill value if this is during an attack. For 2 XP, you can get Signal Mirror. You get an additional +1 skill value if this is during an evasion attempt. For 2 XP, you can get Magnifying Lens. You get an additional +1 skill value if this is during an investigation. For 3 XP, you can get Lucky Charm after you fail a skill test. Ready Pocket Multi-Tool. And for 4 XP, you can get Spring-Loaded. Pocket Multi-Tool's ability is now a reaction ability with the trigger. When you would fail a skill test you are performing, exhaust Pocket Multi-Tool. What do you think about the Pocket Multi-Tool, Matastrophic?
I've actually really come around on this one. I think if you can spare the hand slot, this is actually pretty good. It is a hand slot and it is 3 cost. That is quite a lot for providing +1 to a skill test like every turn. But the fact that it can apply to any skill test is actually pretty useful, because the key thing it can do is it can be part of your offensive skill for the turn, like whether you're investigating or fighting or evading. Well, evading kind of offensive, but your proactive thing that you're doing. But you can also rely upon it in an emergency to do like a willpower test in the Mythos phase. And I think that is where this thing actually gets pretty good. If I had to pick like what I would go for with it, I'd probably go right for the pry bar, because some of those willpower tests in the Mythos phase are kind of nasty. So if you spend 1 XP, you get 2 of these, and you're getting +2 you're getting +2 to a test in every Mythos phase. Okay, that's quite a bit. Like that can turn you from, failure to success with pry bar. That alone I like it. And that's just one checkbox. So I think you do that. I really like spring loaded though, especially for if you're combining with pry bar, because then it becomes a lucky every turn. And like that's pretty nice actually. You got a lucky just sitting there ready to go every turn. I like that. I'm gonna say like that's pretty nice. Yeah, so that's 5 XP for 2 tools. You're probably only gonna have one of them in play. Oh, because it is limit 1 per investigator. Yeah, that is kind of a problem. So you can't have 2 in play. But I could see spending 1 XP for pry bar for sure, and even just having 1 copy of it and being happy. And then if I want to load up with spring loaded, that's pretty nice. Yeah. So yeah, encounter protection. I like this thing.
See, in here I thought you would go for detachable because you like helping out your friends.
It's because you only have one of them. You can only have one of them. It takes up a hand slot, so this is something that really needs to be like important to you. You know what I'm saying? If it were like a body slot or an arcane slot, I'd feel better about it, because it's just because the hand slot's so important. That's why I'm not so keen on going right for detachable. You can only use it once. And the way I see this thing is you have it there to be encounter protection in the Mythos phase. And then if you don't need the encounter protection, you have it boost one of your attacks or one of your evasions or one of your investigates. And it's kind of like an offhand thing. Like that's pretty nice. You do pay for it. It's expensive at 3 cost and a hand slot compared to like an ally that is going to be giving you +1 to a stat all the time. But it's because of this thing's usefulness in both the Mythos phase and the Investigator phase is why I like this.
Yeah, the only bad thing I can really say about this card is the hand slot.
Yeah.
I can't necessarily think of all the Survivor decks I've played off the top of my head and where this would fit in, but the
Hmm.
Survivors have quite a few good cards that can go in those hand slots. Just
Hmm.
thinking from this set alone, we had like Old Keyring is one. You've got your weapons, of course. Can't remember which version of the Derringer it is, but they've got
The
that. Of course,
18.
you've got your
Yeah.
two-handed weapons like sledgehammers and baseball bats and chainsaws and stuff like that. So finding the hand slot for this might be challenging, but I agree with you. I do like the fact that, if
Hmm.
you pick up pry bar, you're getting plus
Like pry
two
bar.
to on treacheries, and then
Yeah.
if you don't need that, then you're getting a +1 on a fight or evade or a investigate, and then depending on how much you're willing to plow into this, spring loaded is pretty nice, where you've got
I like it.
a ready
Yeah.
to go lucky every
Yeah.
turn, and then depending on if you which one of the other ones you've chosen, whether you want to attack, evade, or investigate. I know as a solo player, investigate's pretty attractive, especially for survivors. They tend to have
Hmm.
below average intellect a lot of the time, and it would be kind of nice to just be able to pass an intellect skill test without having to use tricksy cards like look what I found and stuff like that for a
Hmm.
change.
Without even needing to spend a lot of XP on it, I think it's pretty nice. Even like I said, even if I played one copy with pry bar, like I'd feel good about that.
After talking about the mystic cards had a lot of different abilities, and you can plow a lot of XP into them, and sometimes they're a little bit trickier than this one. This one's much more straightforward. +1 skill value, can't really go wrong, and then you don't necessarily need to spend much XP on this to make it even better. So a nice pickup here for the survivors.
Yeah.
And off-class survivors as well.
Exactly.
Is good
Because there are
too.
a bunch of off-class survivors that don't need hand slots. I'm immediately thinking my favorite agility Agnes, Aggie. She can use magnifying lens no, not magnifying lens, signal mirror to add to her evasions.
Evasion Agnes can easily spend 2 XP and get +2 to evasion attempts, which
Yeah,
is pretty good.
hilarious.
Yeah, and it's nice that all the sort of boosters on this are the XP cost is quite low, so
Exactly.
it's not that hard
Yeah.
for off-class survivors to spend a little bit of XP on this and get a pretty good boost. The next survivor customizable is Makeshift Trap. It is a 1-cost event with intellect and agility skill icons. The improvised and trap trait customizable uses to time. This is the first time we have seen time as a resource, which is kind of surprising considering that Maxine I believe she was the main designer on, what cycle was it in the LOTR
Oh,
LCG
that's
that just uses
right.
time counters up the
Time.
wazoo?
That's right. I think it was Ringmaker. Was that the
Ringmaker,
one?
yeah. Ringmaker
Yeah.
uses time counters, and
Hmm.
there's a lot of them to keep track of in that. So, first
Hmm.
appearance of time here. If Makeshift Trap has no time left on it, discard it. You attach it to a location. Each non-elite enemy at attached location gets -1 fight and -1 evade. Forced at the end of the round, remove 1 time from Makeshift Trap. Makeshift Trap has 7 customizations. For 1 XP, you can get Improved Timer. When you play Makeshift Trap, you may increase or decrease its uses by 1. So you can go up to 3 time or down to
Hmm.
1. For 1 XP, you get Tripwire. Only trigger Makeshift Trap's forced ability if there are 1 or more enemies at attached location. For 2 XP, you can get Simple. Makeshift Trap gains fast and play during any free triggered ability window. For 2 XP, you get Poisonous. When you remove 1 or more time from Makeshift Trap, deal 1 damage to an enemy at attached location. For 2 XP, you can get Remote Configuration. When you play Makeshift Trap, you may attach it to a revealed connecting location. For 3 XP, you can get net. Non-elite enemies at attached location cannot move or make attacks of opportunity. And finally, for 4 XP, you can turn your Makeshift Trap into an explosive device. When Makeshift Trap has no time and is discarded, deal 3 damage to each enemy and investigator at attached location. Cards that attach to locations have there's a real mixed bag.
Oh yeah, that's true. That's true.
Now, I think Makeshift Trap tries to resolve some of those issues with its customizations. What do you think about this one?
Upon thinking about this one, I think it's actually not bad. Well, it's not bad because I think net is especially in a multiplayer setting, I think net's pretty good because it stops hunters from hunting and it only costs 1. And unlike, say, lure, it lasts a decent amount of time. So I'm thinking you could actually just use this as a temporary barricade for a couple of rounds where you just you drop it down, you run away, and then the hunters just stall there for a couple of turns, and often that's all you need. That means that's damage you're not taking from hunters for a couple of turns, not just one hunter for one turn with lure, but I think with net, I think there's something to be said about that one. Also, the fact that enemies at the location don't move or take attacks of opportunity. Yeah, so I think net, I think there's something pretty good there. The fact that it stalls hunters for a couple of rounds, I think there's something to that. Also, the fact that each non-elite enemy gets -1 fight and -1 evade just for 1 cost, that's not the worst, considering that this is the set that also has exposed weakness. So there's actually some synergy with exposed weakness and the level 3 flashlight deck, where you actually want to have bring things down to 0 evade. The other one that really stands out to me is actually explosive device, because if you think about it, it's a dynamite blast that costs 1. You have to set it up, but it's a dynamite blast that costs 1 resource.
I
So
think you
between
could
those,
use
yeah, I think you got that.
net and remote configuration
Yeah, decently
would be
well.
pretty
Yeah.
useful in certain scenarios. I'm thinking, of course, of the Devourer below, where you've got all the cultists
Oh.
gathered at the path.
Mm-hmm.
This basically trivializes that, where you
Mm-hmm.
you throw them all in a net and then just walk through the location, because they can't move with you and they can't take attacks.
Yeah.
They can't make attacks of opportunity against you. But then, of course, we've
Exactly.
got hiding place, I believe.
Oh yeah, you got
Does
hiding spot. That's true.
hiding spot
That
does
does
something
something very
similar
similar. But
for
you can just
less
run both
XP,
if you.
mind you.
Yeah, it's true. So you can kind of run both. I think that the fact that net sticks around for a bit longer than hiding spot does, I think there might be something there, worth considering. Hiding spot's really good, by the way. It's very underrated. So I think this one, this is a trap, it's better, than previous traps like lure or anything like that. I think this is actually worth playing around with. And the fact that it costs 1, I think, is kind of nice, because it's not like you have to really set it up. You can just kind of drop it and it'll do something for a little while and kind of work out. It's one of those where it's not very clear how powerful it is, but I think this can be useful.
Yeah, I'm not blown away by -1 fight or -1 evade, but it could come in handy.
Yeah, the fact that it's the same set as, the survivor cards that want you to reduce an enemy down to 0.
True.
Evade. I'm glad it's there as another way to reduce evade values.
Of the survivor customizables, this is the one that seems to require the most thought.
True.
On my part, I'd really have to think of situations where I would want to play this one.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it's as generally useful as some of the others. It really sort of depends on the scenario.
Yeah.
What you would want for this, but I mean, I do
So
like the idea of doing 3 damage to a whole bunch of enemies.
Yeah, I think the most straightforward thing you can do with this is you take improved timer and explosive device. So it becomes a dynamite blast that's going to blow up at the end of the round. And what you do is you say, okay, all right, I'm going to play my makeshift trap, and then I'm going to move away, and you're going to move away, and you're going to move away, and then that we're going to have that enemy hunt to there, and this enemy hunts to there, and then it's going to blow up, and they're all going to take 3 damage, and I've only spent 1 resource. I think that's not bad. It's a very in the moment, this is useful type of
Mhm.
card. Yeah. That might blast where you have a chance to run away. I think that's not bad.
Yeah, so one of the things that just sort of occurred to me with this is that if you had improved timer and explosive device, then you could bait and switch enemies into the trap, which might be fun.
Or what's it, ethereal slip? Like
Yeah, if you want to
funny
get
stuff
really,
like
yeah,
that.
set the trap at your location, then ethereal slip the enemies into it
Yeah.
and blow them up. I mean,
I'm
it's
imagining
really
Rita,
janky, but
like
it's fun.
it's janky and Rita can do it. Because ethereal slip's a trick, just like and Rita can take all the tricks and she can evade and move and
Yep.
I like it. I like it.
Yeah, so I mean, it's a fun card. I'll give it that. I mean,
Yeah, I think
if you
yeah.
can find a fun way to sort of lay an explosive device and keep it on the table for a little while and maybe sort of
Yeah.
round up a bunch of enemies and get them in there. I mean, the Guardians have ways of moving enemies around too, don't they? So maybe if you were able to
Yeah.
coordinate with a fellow player, you might be able
Shove enemies around.
to
Yeah.
shuffle the enemies around enough that you could blow them all up. But again, it requires a lot more, I think, work than say just picking up Dynamite Blast and just tossing the
As it should,
dynamite.
because it's a survivor card and not a guardian card,
True.
and it only costs one, so it should take a little more work. Yeah.
Yeah, looks like there's lots of fun stuff that you can do with this one.
Hmm.
I don't think it's of all the cards that we've looked at so far, this is one I'm probably not reaching for without thinking
Hmm.
about, without having a plan. I think you really need
Hmm.
a plan how you're going to use this, and that
Yeah.
plan may depend on the scenario you happen to be playing. It
Yeah.
can solve problems with scenarios, checkpoint or choke points and stuff like that. You could certainly
Hmm.
use the trap to get around those. A fun, interesting card that probably, if you put some thought into it, you can use in very exciting
Yeah, some
ways.
interesting ways. Yeah, yeah, and it has some synergy with the rest of the survivor pool in this set, so that's nice.
The final Survivor customizable card in the box is Grizzled. It is a skill with the innate and developed trait. It has one wild skill icon. Customizable. When you purchase Grizzled, choose and record 2 traits on its upgrade sheet. If this is a skill test on or against an encounter card, including fighting, evading, or parlaying, Grizzled gains 2 wild skill icons for each of the chosen traits that encounter card possesses. Grizzled has 5 customizations. You can pay 1 XP or 2 XP for Specialist, so you can choose another trait. So if you pick up both versions of Specialist, you can mark 4 traits on this thing. For 3 XP, you get Nemesis. If this is a skill test on or against an enemy with a chosen trait and the test is successful, you may attach Grizzled to that enemy. Reduce the difficulty of tests on or against the attached enemy by 1. For 4 XP, you can get Mythos Hardened. If this skill test is on a treachery with a chosen trait and the test is successful, you may add both Grizzled and that treachery to the victory display. And for 5 XP, you can get Always Prepared. After you draw an encounter card with a chosen trait, return 1 copy of Grizzled from your discard pile to your hand, maximum once per round. So we talked a little bit about during with Makeshift Trap how it sort of rewarded scenario knowledge, and here is another card that
Hmm.
requires a little bit of scenario knowledge in order to pick the right traits for it. But there aren't many level 0 cards that have 3 wild skill icons on them.
That's
So
right.
I do
That's
really
right.
like the level 0 version of this card. As long as you're picking the right traits, and we could go through them all, but there's dozens and dozens and dozens of them at this point.
End times.
The It is worth noting that it is encounter card, and it is important
Yeah.
to remember that includes treacheries, enemies, and locations. So if your location happens to have particular traits on it and has a skill
Right.
test that you need to pass, Grizzled can be used on that as well.
Hmm.
Now, as
That's
for the
really niche, though. Yeah.
customizations, I don't know. None of them
Um.
really rock my world compared to just three
So the one
wild
that
skill
does,
icons.
the one that does, in my opinion, is always prepared. Wouldn't it be great if every time, like once a turn, you draw like a terror treachery? I'm thinking like rotting remains, and boom, you have three icons in your hand.
True.
Like, I think there's something to that. Like always prepared. In like four player, I think Mythos Harden gets pretty good because if you run into like a really nasty treachery, you can put it aside so that way it won't come back. I wouldn't recommend this in low player counts because the fact that the encounter deck has to cycle all the way through and then you would have to get to a state where that treachery came all the way back through again, like that takes a long time. But in four player, that can happen really quickly. So Mythos Harden makes a nice silver bullet against like certain really nasty treacheries, but I like always prepared quite a bit. I think that's actually like worth the 5 XP cost. So personally, I think what really saves this card is the fact that you get to choose two traits right out of the gate. So you can choose something like Monster and Terror, and then like you've kind of covered a lot of nasty things. Or campaign specific, like you might want to do like Humanoid, for example, if you're doing like Innsmouth or if you're doing Path of Carcosa. Just the fact that you get two traits and you're rewarding for you can kind of cover like a good half or more of the encounter deck with two traits. And like if you do like monster, for example, and like terror or something, like it's looking pretty good. And then at that point you've got three willpower icons. Another thing that's worth noting is you can choose traits based on your weaknesses. Because if you have an enemy or a treachery weakness, this will count for those. Yeah, it will. It'll count for those. So based on like your basic random basic weaknesses and what your signature weakness is, that can give you some options.
The only
Yeah,
problem with that is technically, according to the game, you choose your basic weakness after you built your
yeah,
deck.
it's kind of true. But then again, you can you can put a check mark on specialist, get two
True.
copies of Grizzled, add it to your deck after scenario one, and then there you go. Now you've got three traits covered for one
Right.
XP, and then you've got your weakness like taken care of. Yeah, so I think this is actually like pretty good because you get two traits. And I also really like Always Prepared. Nemesis, I don't care about, but I'm glad it exists given that the rest of the Survivor card pool also rewards you for reducing difficulty on tests against enemies. Like there are it has some synergies there. Not a big fan, but I'm glad it at least lines up with some other cards in the Survivor card pool. But yeah, just the base card's pretty good, and I think Always Prepared is quite good. Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree that always prepared is very good. I think the
Oh
reason I
yeah.
sort of uh, glossed over it is because when I looked at Grizzled, I immediately went to Silas, who already sort of has a
Oh, that's true.
pseudo always
Hmm.
prepared ability. I imagine
Yeah.
that Silas, if you picked up both specialists, so you had four traits, and you were basically
Ooh.
able to like play this and then just do I need it? No, I bounce it back to my hand. The
Hmm.
stuff that you could do with Silas, and then of course Silas can bounce things back from his discard pile.
Hmm.
You could cover a lot of ground with
Yeah.
two skills. And I mean it's a high quality skill for a Silas
Yeah.
deck for sure. Or even like who's the other one? Min could take this as well.
Yeah, this is great because it's like encounter card comes up, draw a card, and it's three question marks, and then it's four because you're min. Like, yeah, I like it. Covers the king in yellow, which is not actually an encounter card because it's an asset, but at least it helps you, commit through the king in yellow, on something.
Yeah.
I That's a good point.
So the two investigators who love skills can both take this and get a lot of value out of it. But
Um, Patrice is also worth noting, I gotta say, because of Always Prepared. So note with Patrice, like you end up dumping things in your discard pile, but Always Prepared effectively can be like your sixth card in your hand for that turn.
right, true.
Yeah.
It's definitely nice for Patrice because even if you end up on a turn, say drawing your Grizzled and then not having a test to commit it to, you end up
Hmm.
dumping it into your discard pile. But if you've got always prepared on it,
Yeah, it'll. It'll
I
come
can
back.
pull it back whenever I need it. Now,
Yep.
I also saw somebody mention in regards to Patrice, you can name it on her weakness.
Yes, because it's got more than one trait.
So you can choose,
Yeah, like it's like monster extra dimensional, if I remember correctly. Yeah.
yeah, something like that. So Patrice can use this to basically nerf her weakness, which is always
Nice.
nice.
Yeah.
So
So I think this thing is generally pretty good. Like I like this thing. Yeah.
yeah.
It's not
Yeah,
bad.
even if you're just playing the level 0 version, you can't really
Yeah.
go wrong naming 2 traits and having, a skill card with 3 wild skill icons in your deck. Even if you
Mhm.
just pick Terror for Rotting Remains, like
Exactly. Or Frozen in Fear. It's
or
such a pain in
Frozen
the
in
butt.
Fear.
Wouldn't it be nice if you had 3 willpower, 3 icons to deal with it? Yeah.
Yeah. So very,
Yeah.
very, very good at level 0. And
Mhm.
then if you pick up Always Prepared, you can always have a Grizzled
Yeah.
ready to go. And then if you really want to get crazy, you can name a couple more traits. Or I think for me, I mean, Mythos Hardened, I never draw through the encounter deck. If I do,
Yeah,
it happens
that
rarely.
one's
So
kind of a
that's,
silver bullet, but
yeah,
it's useful
that's
in
not
4-player.
not
Yeah.
great for me. And Nemesis doesn't
Mhm.
really blow me away either, but
Mhm.
pretty solid.
Yeah, I agree.
So
I like it. It's one of those
so
that like it's good at 0 XP and then it just gets better.
yeah.
You can get it to do more. Yeah.
Yeah. So between this and Pocket Multi-Tool, the
Yeah.
survivors get some pretty straightforward, easy to understand, fun to upgrade customizable. Makeshift trap is a little more technical,
Interesting.
but still
Yeah.
has the potential to be a lot of fun in the right deck or with some coordination with fellow players at the table. We have come to the end at last. The final customizable card and the
Oh man, it's been a
final
journey.
card review is Hyperphysical Shotcaster, 4-cost asset with a wild skill icon, item, relic, weapon, and firearm. This is the only neutral customizable in the box. Has the customizable trait uses 4 ether. So again, we have so far we have time and ether being the 2 new uses. If Hyperphysical Shotcaster has no ether, discard it. So that immediately makes it interesting to anybody who can recur cards, like William Yorick, for instance. As an action, you can spend 1 ether, resolve the manifest ability of the Hyperphysical Shotcaster's current form, and as a free triggered ability, you can exhaust Hyperphysical Shotcaster, change its form to one you have unlocked on its upgrade sheet, and the Hyperphysical Shotcaster takes up a hand slot. So as you can see, the Hyperphysical Shotcaster does nothing at level 0.
It's true. Yeah, you need a form to,
So yeah, you need to spend
change it
some
to.
XP on this one. So this isn't one you put in your deck at level 0.
Yeah.
It's not going to do anything, but Hyperphysical Shotcaster does have 7 customizations to look at. For 2 XP, you can get Rail Shooter. It has Manifest Fight with any skill. This attack deals +1 damage. Emphasis on any skill. So if you are playing Agnes and you put the Hyperphysical Shotcaster in your deck, you are fighting with your 5 willpower for +1 damage, which is pretty cool. For 2 XP, you can get Telescanner, Investigate with any skill. If you succeed, discover a clue at any revealed location instead of your location. So not only are you investigating with your best skill, but you can get a clue at any location on the table as long as it is revealed. For 2 XP, you get Translocator, Manifest Evade, attempt to evade with any skill. Before or after this attempt, you may move an investigator or a non-elite enemy at your location to a connecting location or vice versa. For 2 XP, you can get Reality Collapser, Manifest test any skill 3. If you succeed, discard from play a non-weakness treachery that is not attached to an elite enemy. For 2 XP, you can get Matter Weaver. Hyperphysical Shotcaster has this form: Manifest. Choose an asset in your hand and test skill X, where X is that asset's cost. If you succeed, play that asset at no cost. For 4 XP, you can get Etheric Link. Hyperphysical Shotcaster enters play with 2 additional ether, which I believe is the only way to get extra ether on this thing, if I'm not mistaken.
That's true. Because ether's not referenced anywhere else.
Yeah, it's not referenced.
Yep.
And for 4 XP, you can get Empowered Configuration. While using a manifest ability, you get +2 skill value. So you would be, say if you picked up Rail Shooter in Empowered Configuration, you're shooting for +1 damage and +2 skill value. With your best skill, mind you. So what do you think about this one, Matastrophic?
Okay, so think about the Hyperphysical Shotcaster. This card is actually very strong, and here's why. If you're playing an Investigator that has 5 in your primary stat, what you essentially do here is you just spend 2 XP on the thing you want to do that your Investigator doesn't already do, and you become quite good at it. So one thing to note about these is Rail Shooter, Telescanner, Translocator, and Matter Weaver. Not only do they let you use any skill you want on them, but they also provide action compression. So now you're getting into abilities that you would normally have to be of the proper class in order to have access to. So like you would normally have to like be a guardian, or a weapon user in order to get extra damage. You would normally have to be like a seeker to get action compression on top of investigate. Translocator I think is very strong because you get a free movement. So you're getting an evade and a move, for one action. And Matter Weaver, you just play expensive things for for just an action. I don't even think Etheric Link and Empowered Configuration, those are just gravy. But honestly, I think what you just do here is you just pick one ability, maybe 2, and then you just can use your best skill to do something that your deck can't do normally. And I think this is actually really strong as a result.
The ability to use any skill really puts this over the top. If it was just fight, deal +1 damage, that's not good. But fight with any skill, and you've got a 5 in a skill, and there are quite a few investigators who have 5s. I mean, there's Agnes has 5 willpower. There's Harvey's got 5 intellect. Rita has 5 agility. So this thing works particularly well with investigators that have that coveted 5. Of course, there's
Daniela can investigate with her combat. Yeah.
Right. Who's the one I'm thinking of? Mark Harrigan. This actually might be very nice for Mark, simply like even if you picked up the translocator. So if you have a second gun. Actually, for Mark, you could invest in Rail Shooter and Translocator, because Rail Shooter's kind of like the 32 Colt, which he likes anyway. Yeah. 32 Colt is costs no XP, but if you picked up say Rail Shooter and Translocator, then he can either shoot or evade. At 5, which is one of the weaknesses of Guardians. Guardians tend to have very low agility values. So having that option to be like, this thing has 6 health. I don't feel like trying to chew through that. I'm just going to evade it and move on is pretty good. So this
thing's actually really good.
I gotta say. I'm coming around to this one. And I mean, you don't even really need Etheric Link. Like having 2 extra ether is nice, but it starts with 4, which is pretty generous in terms of uses.
Yeah, and you have a second copy coming up because you're going to pack 2 copies because you're paying for 2 copies.
Yeah, for sure.
So this is nice. It's because it gives you all the action. It gives you action compression, which you would normally have to be of the proper class to get, and then you can use any skill you want.
Man, I'm really liking this for Mark. Man, oh man. Like,
I'm telling you, Agility Agnes gets another tool.
Picking up Telescanner to investigate at a 5.
Yeah, but not only do you investigate, but you can save moves by investigating remote locations.
Yeah. Picking up Telescanner and Translocator to deal with investigating and evading as Mark. Man, there you go. You just have to build that deck.
Yeah.
To play
it's not even like you just pick 1 or 2 things and there you go. You have access to things that you didn't have access to before. Also, it's also an item, a relic, a weapon, and a weapon. So like there are various like backpack can find this. prepared for the worst can find this. Dr. Ellie can find this. So there's like you can search for it pretty decently. You can do funny, hilarious things with Bob Jenkins in this. So I guess what I'm saying is because it's an item and a weapon and a relic, you got a lot of support from other areas of the card pool to like help find this thing. So you can like go get it into play, and then do the thing that your deck normally can't do. But
So
now
you
you
can
can.
stack this
Yeah.
on Ellie and she can shoot stuff? Is that...
Yeah, you can have Ellie shoot stuff.
It's like Ellie becomes like the assassin. I'm an archaeologist. I like to collect stuff, but I also like to gun down stuff or evade stuff.
Yeah, and then you can give her the Hungering Blade as well, because that's also a relic, and then she can kill stuff that way.
Yeah, I think the reason I sort of dismissed this card initially simply because it doesn't have an ability at level 0, and
yeah,
my attitude towards the customizables being like, I don't want to have to go read
a million words just to figure out how it works.
To figure out what this thing does. I'd see it,
Mm-hmm.
in the deck lists on Arkham DB, and I'd be just like, nah, I'm not going to bother looking up what this thing does. But yeah, it is pretty good, and you don't really have to invest a lot of XP in it either, which is
just 2, 1 per copy.
Nice.
Yeah.
Spend 2 XP, get the thing you need to do, and and then if you play a campaign and you've got a little XP at the end you're not sure what to do with,
Reality Collapser. That is clutch is what I'd say about that one, because treacheries suck and there's some nasty ones, and every once in a while you want to get rid of one, and the ability to just swap on over and get rid of it is kind of a nice little addition.
Yeah, it is a good way for even if you're just playing a rogue and you want to get rid of Frozen in Fear. Testing 5
testing your agility
if you're Winifred is pretty nice. Should be able to pass that without too much trouble.
Yeah,
and I think 4 uses is probably just enough to get you through a game. And if you got 2 copies, well, great.
And you're gonna, because you've paid for 2 copies, so why not?
So we end off on a high note here. Hyperphysical Shotcaster.
Yeah, we kind of do.
A very nice card, especially if you've got that coveted 5 in a skill value. Usually, if you have a 5 in a skill value, you are probably lacking in some part of the game. Either fighting, investigating, or evading. You're not going to be very good at one of those things. And so the Hyperphysical Shotcaster can immediately... plug that hole for you for very little XP, which is pretty damn good, to be honest.
Yeah, like I said, not just plug the hole, but give you access to the action compression that you would normally need to really go in on. To put, you know what I'm saying? You'd have to.
Yeah, and actually, just looking at Telescanner, that might actually, those min decks that like to barricade themselves and investigate from afar. Here's another. Not only do you get a weapon.
Yeah,
you could
true.
Say pick up Rail Shooter and Telescanner. So now you've got a weapon to fight with, and you can invest. You have yet another way of investigating from afar.
Yep.
To pick up clues at revealed locations. So lots of fun stuff that you can do with the Shotcaster. So a good bunch of cards here. There are a couple of the customizables that miss the mark, but I think all things considered, I think there are more pluses than minuses in the customizables, all told.
I think after we've sat down and had discussions about them and really put some thought into them, I think we've given a lot of good guidance to anyone watching all these videos about like where to start when it comes to like thinking about each customizable, because I think we've by giving examples of their use cases, I think what we set out to do works.
So that's going to do it for our look at the player cards in the Scarlet Keys Investigator expansion. It has taken us months to get to this point. Thank you to everyone who has stuck with us to the end. I hope that you found some interesting information here, some food for thought as you are building your own decks. And it's been quite a journey. Matastrophic and I, and hopefully Nate, if we can coax him back from from Ugoth once his student exchange there is over. Our plan is to tackle the review of both the Path to Carcosa Investigator expansion as well as the Forgotten Age Investigator expansion. As we wait for news of the next set, so far we haven't, at least I haven't heard anything. How about you, Matastrophic? Any?
There has been literally one card revealed from it, and that's all we know. There's been one card.
So
it was a player card.
We don't have any information about the next set. I think we did have Scarlet Keys information by this time last year, but
we're coming close. At time, it's coming about close. Yeah, like if they were going to reveal it, they have like a couple more weeks from the time of this recording to like get it out there. Yeah,
so,
to like match up with last year. Okay.
Who knows? We might get that information. Matastrophic and I have also talked about some other plans that we may reveal sooner than later. So stay tuned for that. But thanks everyone for sticking with us through these reviews. And if and when the next set arrives, we will return. That's going to do it for this episode. If you enjoyed what you hear, remember to like, comment, and subscribe. If you need to contact me, I can be reached at manfromlang@gmail.com. I'm also on Twitter at manfromlang. Until the stars are right, keep your shotgun close and your elder sign closer. Take care out there, and happy investigating.